So we're going to start a tutorial on painting, and this is Sylvia's drawing here, her reference photo, if you will. And these are photos that they took. Together we put them in Photoshop and we layered them up with certain blending modes so that all the faces seem to appear to emanate from the same body. From there, Sylvia went and drew. This isn't it's transferred, but it's transferred from an original drawing. Did this drawing, which created its own challenges because she had to do the face measurements for all three faces, and they all had to relate to each other appropriately. So from there, she primed her background with raw umber, and then we used white transfer paper to transfer the image on. And now we are going to learn some basics of mixing skin tones. For Caucasians, it's typically I start with a similar recipe and I modify it for each photo to get the basic skin tone. So this is my basic palette here, and you'll see raw umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, Naples yellow, cadmium red, alizarin crimson, cad orange. I think we're missing. We have raw umber, but not burnt umber. For the basics of the skin tone, I'm going to take equal parts white, Naples yellow, and yellow ochre, and I'm going to get them mixing up. I don't know why, but I call it mud. It gets me a mid-value, mid-tone, yellowy color. It's not what we want, but it's where we want to start so that we can tweak it. I'm going to take a speck of cad red, and before I dive in on the entire glob of paint, I'm going to mix just a little bit in down here, because if I really don't like it, I want to be able to abandon ship and move in a different direction. And that's looking pretty good for me. I'm going to take a speck of cad orange, and you'll learn along the way that some colors are a lot stronger, and they will permeate the mixture quicker and more completely. And other colors are weak, and you'll have to put more paint. Every brand of color, every different color within that, all have their own properties. Some dry faster, some dry slower, some are matte, some are gloss. Now I compare this. When I look at my picture, I try to find not the highlight, not the shadow, nothing around the ears or the nose, because those are a little redder by nature, but somewhere broad like the cheek or the forehead, and I try to find the middle value. You can ask questions as well, so I want you to be able to clarify along the way. And then I try to match that tone, even to the extent that I might put a little swatch on there. And I'm noting that it should probably be a little redder. Yikes. And even a little darker. So now I'm going to get that burnt sienna, which is a good dark reddish, ruddy color.
Is that a more stronger color?
Yeah. The cad orange is really weak. Cad yellow is really very weak. A little more. I liked it. And if you like something, dive in. Now I have just completely saturated this brush with a whole bunch. So typically you'd use a palette knife, but I don't like to do that. So you do what you're gonna do. I'm gonna put it aside, and it can be cleaned. And this is filbert, right?
Yes.
I like to start with just a mid-sized filbert and get the base tones in there. From here, from this basic.
Oh, that might be a round. That's a round brush.
Now what's filbert? Oh, the flat curved.
Yeah, where it's flat, but it looks like it's been used for about 2 years.
All right, so I've got my round brush here.
Take a pass.
We'll see. And from here, I can pull out in different directions. For highlight, I'll take some of this and I'll pull it down into a highlight. I can pull it up into a redder tone for the nose. I can pull it over for a darker, desaturated tone like the chin and the cheeks. And I want to start to place my value in here. Now this drawing is so good, and I always say when people transfer a drawing, don't lose your quality when you transfer, or else you did a beautiful drawing and then now you're left with a less quality drawing. The same goes for this first round of paint. I like to move quickly, I like to get value, I like to get contrast and color, but I also don't want to compromise my structure, because a lot of time and energy went into making this look good and right, and if you slap paint too aggressively, you're going to be guessing at what the original quality was With that being said, if you keep your original drawing, you can always, once everything dries, flop it back on and compare notes. But for the time being, why do that if you don't have to? I'm putting this in the places that I see this middle value the most, but I'm also overlapping a little bit, because if I come in now with a lighter stretch of paint, which I'm going to mix up with white and Naples yellow, I want to be able to blend it in without creating a whole new color. So I'm going beyond, a little beyond where I normally would want to keep that paint confined for that middle tone. White and Naples yellow are a notoriously weak color, so don't be too scared about diving in and mixing right here on the canvas. Vaughn is fantastic at mixing directly on the canvas. I'm kind of a scaredy cat when it comes to that, but we'll see what happens. Now, as little paint as I have on here, I'm just going to come over here and clean it out some. The nose and the ears are fleshier by nature and cartilagey, so they tend to have a redder tone in the shadows because the light pulls through your skin and you see the tint of the blood. So I'm going to go back to that burnt umber, and I'm going to mix a little darker tone here. I'm going to throw a little cad red in on it, and I'm going to start to lay in these shadows. Now, although this is a lot more red, it's not a lot darker. But whenever I go from light to dark, I do a transition, and that's almost always through a very warm color in the style that I paint. So I've got a very light color here. I do my warm transition, and then I go from there to my darks, which is going to be that burnt sienna, maybe even a little. Grab that burnt umber out. The background on this canvas is really very dark, which means it's going to be hard to see these shadows. But since it's raw umber, which is a very cool dark, it shouldn't be too hard to keep your place and see what's going on. To some extent, it's a little bit like paint by number in the early stages, if you have a detailed enough drawing. But what's nice about oil paint that I don't particularly like about acrylic paint is this is all still completely wet. And in a moment, I'll go back and melt it together. We have a highlight down the nose, but we have a shadow on the right side, but it's not near as red and it's not near as dark. It's more of a yellow tinted tone. And so I'm going to grab some of this yellow ochre, which is a nice color for darkening but keeping it not so ruddy. And I'm going to start laying in some of this shadow here. I'm going to start to pull away from the nose a little bit, get some of the surrounding skin. We don't want to do anything in complete isolation, because then it might look like a potato head or a puzzle that's been put together where things essentially match but not quite, or not completely. See the highlight coming from the bridge of the nose across past the nostril, and that'll form the basis for the top of this cheek. A lot of times people stress when the first 5-10 minutes doesn't look good, but I always encourage them, have the confidence. You've done it before, you'll do it again. And I used to stress out when I would get to a place where I didn't like what was going on. But then you do it enough and you have the confidence to know, hey, this is a puzzle. This is something I need to solve. This is something I need to figure out. I've done it before. I can do it again. And, approach it in that manner, and then you won't get near as frustrated when immediately things don't look quite like you expect that they should. Again, what's great about this is now I can start mixing directly on the canvas because I have an entire base coat down now. This is a good time where if you blur your eyes a little bit, you focus less on the stroke and more on the holistic value and the holistic color and things like that, and you can start to make a few more informed decisions about the way it's looking. What I'm noticing is I've gone broad on this nose here. Well, I can't fight that back until I've got something underneath it. So I'm going to go ahead and put some of that top lip, which is a pretty red, dark color as well. Some of that yellow ochre. And now that I have something to work with, I can take some raw umber, because the corner of that nose, I'm not going to use black on anything, I'm going to use raw umber. The corner of that nose is going to have a real, not crisp as in like the edge is crisp, concise shadow there that's going to help us form the structure of that nose.
Why would you avoid the black color?
If you do it too soon, it makes its way into these colors around it as you work forwards. And so I like to tiptoe around it at the very start. With the nose, it's tricky because on the nostril, the shadow is actually on the face. But as we move towards the tip of the nose, the shadow is actually on the nose. So it doesn't change a whole lot about the way you proceed, but it's good to note because otherwise you may make slippery decisions in the wrong direction. And I'm going to feather it out. I'm lightly touching the canvas. This one I feathered to the outside because it's the shadow on the face. This one I'm feathering to the inside because it's the shadow on the nose. What I'm noticing is that my red feels too succinct. It feels just like a red strip right here, whereas in the photo, it feels like an area moving down the right side of the nose. My highlight got up a little too broad here, which is making her nose look like Owen Wilson.
Would you add white or Naples yellow to it or
no? If I was lightening it, I would, but I'm going to push this entire side a little darker. If anything, I think I'm going to add some cad red. And the same way I started pulling out into the cheek here, I can pull out into the cheek here and even up into the eye pit, because part of the structure of the nose is the bridge of the nose here, which is really dependent on what's going on around it. It's dark, not too red, a lot of bone there, not a lot of skin. So I'm going to rely on yellow ochre to mix my mud and make it darker. Maybe even a tiny bit of burnt umber. Inevitably, this is going to take at least 2 coats. And I think people get hung up when they want things to look right quickly and immediately. And in one respect, it's they want the canvas to go away. They want to not see the canvas anymore. And so they put a lot of paint to try to cover the canvas. But what that ends up doing is it makes it hard to move and blend and mix because you're constantly dealing with large quantities of paint. Again, I'm going from a highlight on the nose to a shadow on the bridge. And so I'm going to transition through a warm color. I've got a little cat orange here. And since I'm not moving into a really red portion like I did on the nose, I'm going to use a cat orange as my warm transition. LV, your computer slept on me. LV, your computer went to sleep at some point. I'm not sure it's still recording. You see here, you see the red, but then up here it's a little more orange. That's the difference.
Oh, look, there's nothing there.
The bone is under here, and so you don't have that fleshy red, whereas there's flesh and cartilage here, so you tend to have more reds here, more reds here and here, more reds on the ear, but things that are real bony, you know, chins and cheeks. And how far back?
No, there's nothing.
Is that why the chin
It's all
has
gone.
No, no bueno. Did it
No.
sleep?
Yeah, I don't know. It was probably because it's not plugged in. It's at 98%, but
Say it again.
oh well.
Is that why your chin? Is that why it's lighter, or because of the bone?
It's just not that reddy, fleshy red. Your hair's in the way.
Mr. Overcash, where do you put the big picture that you draw the?
Oh, you need some?
Yep.
Would you mind cutting me a piece of 12 by 18?
There's one already over there
Oh.
on the cutting board.
Would you grab that for me?
Yes. The piece on the cutting board.
We'll grab some for you, bud. And it's a fight back and forth, back, forth, back, forth.
Just
Not
give
the
it to
light,
this guy.
not the light. You know, push the lights. The shadows will push back, push the lights.